games are not reality. Honest. Here is my son pushing his toy truck around the yard. You might notice that he is pushing it backwards, and this is not an accident. Although he's only 2 years old, he has an acute understanding of how vehicles move. He discovered that if he were to push this in the narrative forward's direction, as if there was a person sitting here driving it, that, one, these edges here were a little uncomfortable for his hands. But more importantly than that, he found that if he leaned on it the way he wanted to, the vehicle would flip and dump all the contents out the back. He found that if he turned it around, this surface is a little flatter and is a little less uncomfortable for his hands, but he could also lean on it as he pushed the vehicle around, thus keeping the contents safely within. This is a phenomenon known as the narrative mechanical dissonance, and it is often decried as a terrible thing that destroys immersion or whatever, but it is not always bad. One of my favorite examples is the Quake bunny hop. Players found that by some quirk of the Quake game engine, that if they were to jump while pivoting their field of view and strafing at precisely the right timing, they were able to skip along at a rate much higher than they could possibly run in a dead sprint. Now, this is completely unrealistic. There is nowhere in reality where bouncing up and down will make you go forward faster. And there was nothing in the Quake narrative which stated this must be true. But it did emerge as an integral component of the Quake deathmatch. Players found that speed was very important for controlling map locations, and the bunny hop achieved that. But as you would jump around, your character would also make that grunting noise as he did so. That cost them stealth, so players had to choose between broadcasting their location for speed or being more sneaky but also slower. Infantile players will ask for total realism, but if you wanted realism, do not play Battlefield 1942. You should go enlist instead. And enlistment is not a game. A sophomoric player, by contrast, knows that simulation is not the same as a game, and they will therefore instead ask that the narrative and the mechanics be harmonized well. They vilify the dissonance. I assert that when players ask for realism or for a lack of dissonance between the narrative and the mechanics, what they really need is for their intuitions to be useful in helping them navigate the system of choices that a game is. Reality is a valuable tool for the game designer, as it is a means by which you may convey many gameplay details with very little explicit explanation. The closer you model some aspects of your game to reality, the easier it is for players whose intuitions are informed by reality to navigate the system of choices that you have created. As long as game designers appreciate that realism is just another form of narrative, no different than any fantasy, and that all narrative is a tool, and it is not the only tool in their toolbox, these narratives can be used to great effect. All narrative is a valuable means of communicating to players the sorts of choices available to them and the sorts of risks those choices entail. And thus, it is a means by which we may make decisions interesting to the players as they make them via their intuitions.